This is the last part of this chapter. So we had started with handling text in the previous part, and I told you that the historians have to take care of a few of the pointers while they are trying to um, analyze whether the particular text is historically important or not. So for that, they have already chalked out certain factors which are important, like language, who was the author, what kind of audience it was catering to, what was the time period when it was written, all of that. We are going to discuss each and every factor briefly now. So first is the language and the content. So the version of Mahabharat which we have been considering is far more simpler than that of Vedas. We know that Vedas are the oldest texts, and especially Rig Ved, which is also considered the first testament of humankind, because that was the earliest, most text composed in chaste Sanskrit. In comparison to the Vedas, Mahabharata is considerably simpler in terms of language, and also as compared to the Prashastis also, like we have talked about Samudragupta and the Prayag Prashasti written for him by his court poet Hari Sen. So even that Prashasti has a very complex Sanskrit, but in comparison to that, Mahabharata has been written in a far simpler language. Apart from that, each of these epics and texts, they have been divided into two parts, like they can be categorized into two parts by the historians. One part is the part which contains purely of the stories, the narration part, where a person is just narrating what happened, what did not happen, and but there is no analysis of that morally or ethically. It is just a pure narrative of the scenes, or of the things that might have happened. So that is the narrative part. The second part is the didactic part. So didactic part is major instructions. So someone is telling you a story, and at the end of it, they are also adding the moral of the story. So that is the didactic part, that since this has happened and this was the result of it, so the moral of the story is that one should live a life like this. So that is the instructive part, where a person is trying to make you learn something from it, especially the social norms. So most of these, especially Mahabharat, what we have found out is that the narrative part is the oldest part, while the didactic sections were actually included later on. They were not originally a part of it, but they were added later on by the historians to make Mahabharat even more appealing to the masses, and to make them learn about the way in which they should live their life. So originally Mahabharata was meant to be just a dramatic story, but later on, to give it a little bit more of a meaning and relevance in everyday life, the didactic portions were also probably added later. The picture that I had shown you in the beginning, that is also taken from painting which is based on Mahabharata, and this is basically the painting where Krishna is advising Arjun on the battleground. So this is a part of Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavad Gita is considered to be a part of Mahabharata, which was later on added to it. So this is the type of instruction which was added later to Mahabharata to give more meaning to it. And that was about the painting. So apart from this, Mahabharata is also known as Itihas. Now, Itihas in itself means history, but it is known as Itihas because the person or the people who have written them together, they believe that this had happened before. So that is why it is called as Itihas, which we call as history. So some historians think that the memory of an actual conflict amongst kinfolk was preserved in the narrative. Others point out that there is obviously no corroborative evidence even now, whether Mahabharata, the Great War, happened or not. Even that is a little bit tricky, because we do not have much evidence related to whether that war definitely happened or not, or whether it is just a story. So the next important part is the authors and the dates. Now, how important are the authors and the dates? So again, in reference to Mahabharata, The original story was probably composed by charioteer bards. Bards are also called as sutas. So their main purpose is to sing the stories of a popular person, or the deeds that they have, the good deeds that they have done. So the bards are basically the musicians who sing stories of praise of the Kshatriyas, and they used to accompany the Kshatriya warriors in the battlefield to make them more, to encourage them more, to motivate them more. They used to compose poems and celebrating their victories, etc. So all the stories or the narration part which have been included in Mahabharata, this is basically have been transferred from the word of mouth. That is, they have been transferred orally from succession to succession. That is, from generation after generation, their stories have been transferred through the word of mouth. But it was only in the 5th century BCE that Brahmins took it to their own responsibility, that they are going to write down this epic into proper words. So this was the time when Kurus and Panchalas, Kurus were actually the lineage of Pandavas and Kauravas. So these people had started coming into power. I had told you this was the time period when Mahajanpads were prospering. So we have already talked about that. So during that time period when the Mahajanpads were prosperous, there was a lot of increase in their wealth, that they realized that they have to write the Mahabharata in order to transfer it down through the many generations coming after that. That Kuru was a very popular and a very prosperous kingdom. So we notice another phase in the composition of the text, which is between 200 BCE to 200 CE. So this was the time period of worship of Vishnu, and Krishna is considered as one of the avatar or incarnation of Vishnu. So this is the time period when the large didactic sections, as I already told you, the instructive part, the moral, the ethical part was added later on to give people a more like chalked out path on which they should lead their life on. The last subpart here is the search for convergence. The search for convergence. Convergence means to find out commonness in various texts or in various sources of information, and that those common paths are considered to be the most believable because they have been repeated again and again in many texts. So those converging points are extremely important, and historians try to find out those converging points so that they can be sure of about at least some facts which are common to most of the texts. So Mahabharata, like any major epic, contains many descriptions of battles, forests, palaces, and settlements. So in the year 1951 and 52, B.B. Lal, who was an archaeologist, he excavated a village called Hastinapur near Meerut. You must have heard about it. And through that position, he started excavating that area, and he came across a lot of evidences. And through those evidences, it is believed that probably Hastinapur was the capital city of the Kuru clan or the Kuru kingdom. So this is how you try to find out convergence, by trying to explore and excavate the various areas to find evidences to support the various beliefs. So this is about the search for convergence. Now, one of the most challenging episodes in the Mahabharata is obviously the Draupadi's marriage with Pandavas, and I had already told you polygyny is a practice when man is marrying many women simultaneously. But polyandry is a practice the other way around, when women have more than one husband. So Draupadi is again one example of polyandry, where she had five husbands. So this again is a story in Mahabharata, that actually Arjun had won Draupadi in a Swayamvar, but when he brought back Draupadi with his four brothers to his mother Kunti, Kunti was actually doing some household chores, and she was mainly busy in her prayers. So without even realizing what Arjun has brought with him, she said that, okay, whatever Arjun has got, all of you five brothers can divide it among yourselves. Like, you can share. So this is the story. So she said that share to all the five brothers. They married uh, Draupadi together, so this became a practice of polyandry. So this again is a question, is a controversy, because in a society as it was then, polyandry was not really an acceptable practice, and therefore, in various texts of Mahabharata that we have retrieved from various parts of the country, different kind of explanations have been given that why this has happened, why Draupadi had to marry five men in order to make it more relevant to the people, because obviously there were questions that how come a woman married five men. So this again, in order to bring it more to the acceptance of the people, various explanations have been given so that Mahabharata does not fall into disfavor among the common masses. So some historians note that while the practice of polyandry may have seemed unusual or undesirable, but it was still prevalent in some parts of the Indian subcontinent, and others suggest that there may have been a shortage of women during that time, and which is one of the reasons why probably the practice of polyandry might have flourished then. So this is a similar kind of excuse as was given was for polygyny. Why men started marrying more than one woman was that at that time it was thought that the population of um, the world was reducing drastically. So, to increase the population, the men used to marry more than one woman and try to raise more and more children. So, that increased the practice or popularized the practice of polygyny. Similarly, the practice of polyandry, the same sort of excuse is given that probably the population of women was less, and that is why men had to marry, like many men had to marry the same woman, so in the situation of crisis. So these are all debates. We cannot be 100% sure about what might have happened, but these are the most believable explanations of the facts that we have retrieved from the past. So the last part is the dynamic text, which is a title that has been given to Mahabharat. It is dynamic is something which is not stationary, it is changing all the time. So over the centuries, the versions of the epics were written in different languages in the process of dialogue between peoples, communities, and those who wrote the texts. And most of these texts have been continuously circulated among certain people, and but the episodes were depicted in sculpture and painting. So this is how Mahabharat has been adopted by various other artistic sides of the society, and people have tried to use them as their own artistic flavor. So that's all for today.